Today, I'm going to be talking about points of departmentalization, articulating artificial intelligence techniques to the InterPARES chain of preservation model. And this is going to be step one of this evolving research because I think we need to establish the rationale for doing this today and what we're currently doing within the project that can address some of these issues already. So I'll do that by starting with some definitions. Introduce the chain of preservation as understood in the context of InterPARES, then get to the motivation for the study, and then provide the context of the studies that are currently trying to address these issues and where they fit within the chain of preservation. And then I'll describe next steps. I must say I'm doing this in concert with Luciana Durante and Fred Cohen, but I've been taking the lead on this one today, so all errors are mine. So definitions. First of all, we want to define what a record is in this context. So just to refamiliarize ourselves with these things, a record is a document made or received in the course of a practical activity as an instrument or a byproduct of such activity and set aside for action or reference. And because this is an international context, we also have the synonym archival document, which we need to translate into the Latin languages because of the way English has adopted record versus document. Here's an example of one. This is an email that I received confirming that I indeed did submit a grant to our university review process. I love this example if it were bigger, so you could actually read it, but the part below is the actual text the humans can read, and the text above is what the machines can read. So we actually have all of the persons represented in the diplomatic analysis of this particular record, and this is one of the things I used to teach with. Archives, by our lights, is three things. It's records, a place, and an institution. As records, it's the whole of the documents made and received by a juridical or physical person or organization in the conduct of affairs and preserved. This is also called the fond. It's a place where records are selected for permanent preservation and where they're kept. And as an institution, an agency or institution responsible for the preservation and communication of records selected for permanent preservation. Now we've got this concept, a model of a record's life cycle. It's not the only model, but it's a model, which is, it says, records management and archival science that characterizes the lifespan of a record as comprising 8 sequential stages, as we have organized our research here, actually, in this particular era of the study: creation or receipt of records, classification of records, maintenance and use of records, the disposition through destruction or transfer of records to an archival institution or agency, the description of archival finding aids, description in archival finding aids, pardon me, preservation, and then reference and use of records. In this context, we care very much about the identity and the integrity of records because this will lead us to presume their authenticity. So as we understand, identity is the whole of the characteristics of documents or a record, uniquely identify it and distinguish it from other documents or records, and with integrity is a component of authenticity. And integrity, as discussed already today, is the quality of being complete and unaltered in all essential aspects. With identity, is a component rather of authenticity. So authenticity is the trustworthiness of a record, the quality of the record that it purports to be, and that it's free from tampering or corruption. And then finally, the chain of preservation is the system of controls that is in place because of authenticity, because of identity and integrity, that extends over the entire life cycle of the records in order to ensure they are authentic over time. So now let's talk about the chain of preservation. Now, I'm doing this at a very high level. Those of you familiar with the model know it's detail. So I'm not going to do that. We're going to do this from a very high level. There are 3 major functions or activities that happen in the chain of preservation. There's the record making or capture, record keeping or maintenance, and permanent preservation. And this constitutes the record life cycle. In the model, we talk about making record systems and managing records in record keeping systems and managing records in permanent preservation systems. So this is the sort of meta level where we're talking about the processes that we need in place for systems to actually maintain authentic records. And then, of course, we put a head on a head and say that we have to manage the entire framework as well. And so there are 4 labeled categories within the chain of preservation. A1 to A4. So, okay, that's the chain of preservation. These are the definitions that we're operating under. What's our motivation for this particular work? The InterPARES Trust AI goals are to identify specific AI technologies that can address critical records and archival challenges, to determine the benefits and risks of using AI technologies on records and archives, to ensure the archival concepts and principles inform the development of responsible artificial intelligence, and to validate outcomes from Objective 3 through case studies, and demonstrations. This study has this as the motivation. Whereas the computational lift of large language models is costly, can we seek out more lightweight solutions to align with archival theory? Through the lens of the chain of preservation and the record's lifecycle, we want to examine how quote-unquote traditional artificial intelligence can be exploited for the creation, management, and permanent preservation of records. Then we can departmentalize, I'm coining this term at this point, we can departmentalize points in the chain of preservation, that's a typo there, with particular traditional techniques of AI. So linking the traditional techniques with particular points in the chain of preservation. Yeah. Oh, next slide. So these all are in favor of the goals, but what do I mean by traditional? I'm talking about techniques, not technologies as well, right? So I'm talking at an abstract level here. But what I'm operationalizing, well, sort of as traditional AI, is reasoning and problem solving with lightweight techniques, knowledge representation for basic activities or proposing actions that could be fed into reasoning techniques, or learning to characterize the materials and contexts in the chain of preservation, or perception techniques that do not require much power. So this is how I'm coining the term. This is traditional in that sense. That's the same thing. They're interchangeable. But writing is research, and we've just learned that I could have used lightweight instead of traditional. The fact of the matter is, Fred wrote the proposal, and he said traditional. So I wanted to do honor to the author of the proposal, but I would probably choose lightweight given how I've operationalized it here. All right, so what I've done next is say, okay, we have 5 continents working on this problem. How do we map the studies that we have onto the chain of preservation as we see? Now, this is up to interpretation. This is my interpretation. Please refute it if you see that there can be an argument made against my placement of these things. And of course, this is shorthand, and I'll elaborate more in more detail on subsequent slides. But this is the high level of where I've seen these studies fall in the chain of preservation. So if you can see your study number there, you can immediately refute me, or we can walk through and see a little bit more of what we can see. You can see that as far as I can tell, only one addresses the whole framework, the management of the whole framework of the chain of preservation. So that's CU7, creation and use 7. There are a ton at the bottom there. RP01 is the start of the string that address the entire chain of preservation and the life cycle of the records. There are also some that I can't find linked to the chain of preservation, and so I've enumerated those there as well. They're general studies, perhaps about topics in archivy. But as you can also see, there's a ton in the preservation section. And when we dive into that, most of that is actually access and retrieval, so which is super interesting given our focus on identity and integrity of records. The creation point, we've got some work to do there, I think. So here are the actually enumerated names of the studies at the top level. So these are the ones that don't seem to hang off of any particular joint or articulation in the chain of preservation. You can see there, most of them are like, either they take the entire life cycle into account, or they're not actually focused on a particular subsection of the chain of preservation. And then back to this, blah, blah, blah. And so under the first one, manage this investigating the use of AI technologies in the realm of e-government development is a literature review and survey. Oh, I should go back actually. Let me do this real quick. What I've also tried to do in this mapping is to see what kind of research methods are being deployed in that, to see if we can cull any sort of lightweight AI things from them or not. And so I've tried to characterize them in particular ways. I will say the vast majority of the studies are literature reviews. At least they start that way, of course, almost all of them, but some of them end there as well. Okay. So this one hangs off of the managed framework of the whole thing. I was trying to do this for visual acuity, but unnecessary, it looks like. And so now we're into the manage records in a record-making system here. And so we've got creation and use studies, which we should see here, of course, and also appraisal and acquisition, which we should see here as well. And in all of these, we're looking at surveys, literature reviews, and case studies for the most part. And then some exploration on automatic records classification. So we got some purchase there. We'd probably be able to articulate that or departmentalize that to the model once that study is completed. And then when we go into record keeping systems, we have appraisal and acquisition again, and then we have a little bit of arrangement and description there as well, defining and evaluating archival databases in government organizations. It's a corpora analysis of what's actually out there, and some case studies. Again, we see literature reviews and surveys and case studies as the main method of getting at these studies. And so now when we move to the final preservation, here we have a whole bunch of reference and access studies. So again, if we're worried about the controls in place for maintaining the identity and integrity of records, we're okay. I think we're doing okay study-wise as far as that's concerned. But we're definitely, as a group, focused much more on access, it seems like, which is super interesting. I think this is because the techniques available to us in the artificial intelligence techniques available to us, at least at the first blush, are about, manipulating things that are already made or enhancing it through computer vision, for example, the seals and signs and signatures. So more access stuff. So what I hope future research for me will look like is to dive deeper into the whole chain of preservation to see where we might be able to add to those particular articulations. Please.
I remember that one of the reasons why we started this project was to identify the AI that has existed for decades.
Yeah.
And so that still works well, so that we don't have to go there. So maybe in those initial phases, if you wonder.
We will be wondering. Yes, no, that is our true north still. That is definitely where we're headed. The question was where we didn't have to look because somebody else was looking. And that's what I'm covering at the moment, right? So I wanted to take advantage of the brain trust that you've developed in order for us to work more effectively, if not efficiently. Yes, so there's a lot of these studies. So here are the other ones as well. Defining and evaluating archival databases and government organizations appears here again, as you can see. Some of the studies actually appear in more than one area. And then we do get some arrangement and description stuff here. But again, much of it, as you can see, is applying the known AI techniques in order to describe things so that they're accessible, not necessarily to describe them for the purposes of authenticating them per se. All right, so that's the first step. So this is the motivation. This is the survey of what we've got going on, and I'll be making more detailed articulations of that moving forward. But thankfully, next steps, we finally got the subaward transferred. So I'm able to hire a PhD student. I've actually got an interview with the PhD student starting next week. So we'll add some more people power to this in order to dig into it. The candidate is actually working in archival science with Marika C4 at the University of Washington. So yeah, the next step is to keep going detailed and move into that. Thank you very much.